A golden kingdom ruled by warrior women has haunted explorers for centuries. This is the legendary world of the Amazons and their lost cities of gold, a story woven from equal parts ancient fear and desperate greed. Was this powerful society just a myth crafted by Greek storytellers, or could a real civilization of female warriors have inspired these enduring tales? By the end of our journey, you will have the evidence to decide for yourself where myth ends and history begins. We will track these fierce women from the pages of Homer to the vast Amazon rainforest, examining crumbling chronicles from conquistadors and groundbreaking discoveries from modern archaeology. We will see how a single legend can shape the map of a continent and hide astonishing truths about our past. What forgotten reality is waiting behind the story of the Golden Amazons? The Amazons first galloped into history not from a jungle but from the epic poetry of ancient Greece. In Homer's Iliad, written nearly 3,000 years ago, they are mentioned with a kind of grim respect. King Priam of Troy, watching the Greek heroes arrayed against his city, remarks that he once fought alongside Amazons, describing them as the equals of men. This was not a story about them, but their presence was already a given, a powerful force from the distant edges of the map. This established a crucial idea: the Amazons were not monsters from a fairy tale, but a people considered real if remote by the ancient world. Their legend grew through other famous Greek myths. The hero Heracles, as one of his 12 labors, was tasked with retrieving the magical girdle of the Amazon queen Hippolyta. This story framed a direct confrontation between the ultimate symbol of Greek masculine strength and the pinnacle of this foreign, female power. Similarly, the great warrior Achilles was said to have fallen in love with and slain an Amazon queen named Penthesilea during the Trojan War, a moment of tragic romance layered over brutal conflict. So who were these women in the Greek imagination? They were consistently placed in Anatolia, what is now Turkey, or in the vast steppes north of the Black Sea in Scythia, lands the Greeks considered wild and untamed. The Amazons represented the ultimate inversion of Greek societal order, a world where women ruled, fought, and owned property, while men were relegated to domestic roles or excluded entirely. They were formidable adversaries, yes, but also objects of deep fascination. Their existence played on Greek anxieties about powerful women, while also fulfilling a certain fantasy of a society utterly different from their own. They were the ultimate outsiders, a mirror held up to Greek civilization that reflected both its fears and its curiosities. This foundational myth, born from epic poetry and heroic tales, would prove astonishingly durable, setting the stage for a quest that would one day cross an ocean. The Greeks were not alone in telling stories of formidable female warriors. Across the globe, echoes of the Amazon archetype appear in the histories and legends of diverse cultures, suggesting a powerful, recurring human theme. Far to the north and east of Greece, on the vast Eurasian steppes, the nomadic Scythians and Sarmatians thrived. Ancient historians like Herodotus wrote that their women rode, hunted, and fought alongside men. Modern archaeology has stunningly confirmed this. Excavations of Scythian burial mounds have uncovered the remains of women buried with bows, arrows, and even battle injuries, some laid to rest with the full honors of a warrior. These were not mythical figures, but real women who lived a life on horseback, a reality that likely filtered back to Greece and colored their tales of distant, fearsome Amazons. Across the world in West Africa, the Kingdom of Dahomey maintained an elite all-female military regiment for centuries, right up to the late 1800s. Known as the Agogi, these women were rigorously trained, fiercely loyal to the king, and renowned as the most formidable part of the Dahomey army. European colonists who encountered them called them the Dahomey Amazons, a direct and conscious link to the ancient Greek legend. Here was a documented historical core of female warriors, a living parallel to the myth. Further echoes can be found in other traditions, from the warrior women in some Chinese folklore to the respected female fighters within certain Native American tribes. This global pattern is crucial. It tells us that the idea of women as skilled combatants and leaders is not a singular Greek fantasy, but a thread woven into the human story in multiple places and times. The Greek Amazons may have been a mythologized version, an exaggerated portrait of a real phenomenon they heard whispers about from the edges of their known world. So if the seed of the legend was a global reality, what happened when that legend sailed across the Atlantic and met a new world? But the legend was about to undergo its most dramatic transformation. When Spanish explorers reached the northern coast of South America in the early 1500s, they were driven by one overwhelming desire to find gold. They had already heard whispers of a mythical golden king, El Dorado, a ruler so rich he coated his body in gold dust during sacred ceremonies. This obsession would soon intertwine with an ancient European story in a way that would permanently rename a continent. As conquistadors pushed up the vast, unnamed river systems, they encountered fierce resistance from indigenous warriors. In one fateful expedition led by Francisco de Orellana in 1542, the Spanish reported being attacked by tall, powerful fighters who, from a distance, appeared to be women. Chroniclers of the journey wrote of long-haired warriors who fought with exceptional skill and ferocity. Orellana, remembering the Greek tales from his own culture's mythology, named the river after them, the Amazon. With that act, a legend leaped from the pages of Homer onto the maps of the New World. More than just a name, this began a new chapter in the search. The stories evolved. Now, explorers weren't just looking for a golden king, they were searching for his counterpart, a golden queen. Rumors spread of an inland empire ruled by a powerful tribe of women, a society so wealthy its temples were plated in gold. Conquistadors and missionaries began collecting indigenous tales that seemed to confirm their hopes, stories of a female-led tribe called the Icamiabas, or reports of a distant kingdom where women lived independently and possessed great mineral wealth. The ancient Greek myth of warrior women had fused with the New World's promise of El Dorado, creating a new and irresistible target, the Amazon's lost cities of gold. This was no longer just a curiosity from classical texts. It was a tangible destination, a prize that could make a man richer than a king. The search for it would drive men to madness and death in the green hell of the rainforest, forever linking the fate of a myth to the geography of an unknown land. This voyage would become one of history's most consequential misunderstandings. In 1541, Francisco de Orellana, part of a larger expedition, was sent down river to find food. He would never return to his commander. Instead, carried by the powerful current, he and his men became the first Europeans to travel the entire length of the mighty river system. His chronicler, a friar named Gaspar de Carvajal, kept a detailed diary of their harrowing journey. It is in these pages that the modern Amazon was born. Carvajal describes numerous clashes with indigenous tribes along the banks, but one encounter, recorded in June of 1542, stood out. He wrote of a fierce attack by tall, pale-skinned warriors with long braided hair, who fought with such strength and skill that the beleaguered Spaniards could barely hold them off. To Orellana and his men, conditioned by the myths of their homeland, these formidable fighters could only be one thing, the Amazons of legend. Carvajal's account goes further, claiming they captured two of these warriors who confirmed they were part of a female-led society. With this single journal entry, a river without a name gained an immortal identity. But how much truth was in this report? Modern historians approach Carvajal's chronicle with deep skepticism. The expedition was in dire straits, starving, diseased, and desperate for a justification for their failure to regroup with the main party. Stories of mythical, gold-rich kingdoms were a proven way to secure pardons and, more importantly, future funding from the Spanish crown. Fabricating or embellishing an encounter with the legendary Amazons would have been a strategic masterstroke. There is also a simpler, more plausible explanation. Many indigenous tribes in the region had male warriors who wore their hair long and often fought without upper body garments. From a distance in the chaos of battle, a Spanish soldier could easily have mistaken them for women. The chronicle itself may hint at this, as Carvajal notes they were only sure of the warrior's gender after taking them prisoner, a dubious claim under the circumstances. So was it a deliberate lie, a tragic case of mistaken identity, or a fleeting glimpse of a real matrilineal culture? Orellana's account is likely a tangled knot of all three, a survival narrative spun with threads of myth and misinterpretation. Yet its impact was utterly real. The name stuck and the legend found a new home, transforming from a classical curiosity into a colonial obsession that would draw countless others into the green depths. Orellana's story did not end with his voyage, it ignited a fire. His reports of a river of Amazons and golden kingdoms sent shockwaves through the Spanish Empire, a siren call for every fortune seeker and fanatic. The quest now had a name and a location, and it would draw men deeper into obsession. One of the most infamous chapters began just over a decade later, in 1559, with the expedition of Pedro de Ursua. His mission was to finally find the riches Orellana had described, to pacify the region and locate the source of its legendary wealth. But the jungle had a way of twisting dreams into nightmares. Among Ursua's men was a volatile, paranoid soldier named Lope de Aguirre. As the expedition floundered in the immense wilderness, plagued by disease and hostile attacks, Aguirre led a bloody mutiny. He murdered Ursua and declared himself a rebel against the Spanish crown, leading his men on a rampage of terror down the river. Aguirre's madness was fueled by the same golden mirage, but his quest warped into something darker, a personal crusade of vengeance against an empire he felt had betrayed him. His story became a cautionary tale, showing how the search for El Dorado and the Amazons could unravel a man's soul. Yet the legend itself was evolving, growing more elaborate with each failed journey. The simple report of warrior women along a riverbank blossomed into tales of an entire inland empire. Explorers and missionaries began speaking of a specific place, a mythical city sometimes called Paititi, or a grand kingdom ruled solely by women, rich beyond measure. These stories were no longer just European imports, they were a fusion. Missionary accounts from Jesuits and Franciscans, eager to find new souls to convert, diligently recorded indigenous stories they heard in remote villages. Many of these native tales spoke of powerful female spirits or matriarchal societies living far upriver, stories which the Europeans eagerly interpreted as confirmation of the classical Amazon myth. A feedback loop was created. The Spaniards arrived looking for Amazons, so they asked about warrior women. Locals, perhaps to be polite, to trade, or to divert these dangerous strangers away from their own homes, would tell them what they wanted to hear, pointing always further inland to a distant, powerful tribe. Each new account added another layer of gold, another temple, another detail, making the prize seem perpetually just out of reach. This cycle of hope and hearsay kept the dream alive for over a century. Maps from the 1600s and 1700s often depicted a vast, blank interior labeled simply Reino de los Amazonas, the Kingdom of the Amazons, a cartographic placeholder for a fantasy. The legend proved more durable than any expedition, a psychological phantom that guided exploration and justified immense suffering. It was no longer just about finding gold, it was about conquering a symbol, the ultimate reversal of the natural order as Europe saw it. To find and subdue a kingdom of women would be the final proof of European masculine dominance over a wild, new world. So the search continued, a tragic parade of hopeful men vanishing into the green, each failure only adding to the mystery. Each new story making the lost cities of gold feel more real and more desperately desired than ever before. For centuries, the Amazons remained trapped in the pages of books and the boasts of explorers, a story without a body. Then, the spade of the archaeologist broke the soil and the legend began to breathe. The search shifted from the steamy jungles of South America back to the windswept steppes of Central Asia, to the very lands the ancient Greeks had pointed to all along. Here, in the vast expanse of modern Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan, researchers began excavating ancient burial mounds known as kurgans. These were the tombs of the Scythians and Sarmatians, the nomadic horse-riding cultures that Greek historians like Herodotus had described with such awe. What they found inside did not just support the old stories, it surpassed them. In numerous sites, such as the remarkable burials at Pokrovka, archaeologists uncovered graves that stopped them in their tracks. The skeletons were laid with unmistakable honor, surrounded by the tools of war and the symbols of power, but these were not the bones of men, they were women. And they were buried as warriors. Beside them lay iron swords, their edges still hinting at past sharpness. Quivers held dozens of bronze-tipped arrows designed to be fired from a galloping horse. Intricately carved bone plates from composite bows rested nearby, the technology of the elite archer. In some graves, the remains of horses were interred alongside the human remains, a final tribute to a life spent in the saddle. This was not a single, anomalous find. It was a pattern emerging across the steppes. The evidence was physical, undeniable. The injuries on some of the female skeletons told their own grim stories, fractures and weapon wounds that spoke of a life of combat, not just ceremony. The grave goods were not decorative trinkets, they were the functional, prized possessions of a high-status individual, a person whose role in society was to fight and to lead. Archaeology had provided the missing link, the tangible culture that could have inspired the Greek myths. These were real women who rode, hunted, and fought, living in the very regions from which travelers' tales would have drifted back to the Mediterranean. The Amazons of legend were no longer just a frightening fantasy invented by Greek poets. They were a dramatized, distant echo of a steppe reality. The warrior women had been found not in a lost city of gold, but in the silent, dignified earth of the kurgan. This discovery reshapes the entire mystery. If the core idea of the Amazon, the female warrior, was rooted in a historical truth, then what other parts of the sprawling legend might contain a seed of reality? Could the stories of a distant, wealthy, female-led society have traveled farther than anyone thought? These were not just ceremonial graves, they were archives written in bone and metal. The skeletons themselves tell a violent, compelling story. One young woman, buried with a quiver of 40 bronze-tipped arrows, had an arrowhead of a different kind lodged deep in her knee, a grim souvenir from a battle she survived long enough for the wound to partially heal. Another showed a skull fracture, likely from a mace or club, that had also knitted together over time. These are not the injuries of accidents, they are the marks of combat, evidence of a life lived on the front lines of steppe warfare. The fact that these wounds healed tells us something equally important. These women were valued enough to be cared for, nursed back to health, and returned to their place in society. They were not disposable, they were essential. Beyond the scars of war, other discoveries paint a vivid portrait of their identity. Using advanced imaging techniques, archaeologists have detected intricate tattoos on mummified skin, patterns of mythical beasts and swirling designs that matched those found on male warriors. This was a shared artistic language, a symbol of status and spiritual belief that knew no gender divide. And then there are the headdresses. In a burial in present-day Russia, a woman was found with an elaborate golden diadem, a towering, intricate piece that would have made her seem physically larger, more imposing, a living symbol of power and connection to the divine. Another was buried with a unique leather headdress adorned with golden animal figures, a piece that likely denoted a specific and high-ranking social or ritual role. This evidence dismantles old assumptions completely. It shows a nomadic society where social stratification was complex, and an individual's path was not predetermined by their sex. A woman here could be a warrior, her body bearing the proof of her profession. She could be a priestess marked with sacred tattoos and symbols. She could be a political leader crowned with gold that signified her authority. This was the plausible reality that Greek merchants and soldiers might have encountered, or more likely, heard fragmented tales about from travelers along the Black Sea coast. The Greeks then took these kernels of truth, the concept of women who rode and fought as equals, and spun them into their own cultural narrative, transforming skilled horse archers into the mythic Amazons who opposed their heroes. The legend now had a birthplace not in a jungle but on the open grassland, a real-world culture that was, in many ways, just as formidable as the stories suggested. This connection between myth and archaeology now presents a fascinating puzzle of its own. How did stories of steppe warriors become the legend of the Amazons in faraway Greece? The answer may lie in a simple human process of cultural transmission, a game of ancient telephone played across the shores of the Black Sea. For centuries, Greek colonists established bustling trading outposts along the northern coast of the Black Sea, in places like Olbia and Chersonesos. These were not remote military forts, but vibrant cities where Greeks lived, traded, and interacted directly with the nomadic Scythian and Sarmatian tribes of the interior. Imagine a Greek merchant used to the draped linen chittons of his homeland, staring at a Sarmatian woman who rides into the market. She would have been an utterly alien figure. She wore practical trousers and a tunic perfect for life on horseback, a style the Greeks associated with foreign barbarians and, to their eyes, masculine dress. She likely carried a powerful composite bow, a weapon of war and hunting that required immense skill. Most shockingly of all, she conducted herself with an authority and independence that defied every Greek norm of female domesticity. To the Greek observer, this was a living inversion of their world. The scholarly theory suggests that over generations, these first-hand encounters and travelers' tales filtered back to the Greek mainland. The exotic reality of steppe culture provided a perfect template for storytellers and poets. The Greeks, masters of myth-making, took these raw observations and refined them. They amplified the strangeness, removed the context of a cohesive nomadic society, and distilled it into a pure archetype, the Amazon. The egalitarian customs of the steppe tribes, where women could own property and hold status based on skill, became a fantastical society where men were excluded entirely. The practical trousers became a symbol of their martial nature. Their legendary skill with the bow, a weapon the Greeks respected but associated with foreign tactics, became a defining trait of these mythic foes. In essence, the Amazons were not invented from nothing, they were sculpted from a misunderstood reality. The Greeks took something real and terrifyingly different and turned it into a mirror for their own cultural anxieties, a legendary race of women who existed to be ultimately conquered by heroes like Heracles and Achilles. This theory gives the legend a powerful grounding. It means the Amazons were born not in a writer's isolated imagination, but at the messy, fascinating frontier where two vastly different worlds collided. The fear and fascination were real because the inspiration was standing right in front of them, wearing trousers and holding a bow. But what about the Amazon itself? Did the steppe cultures simply inspire a story that later explorers misapplied to an empty jungle, or could the New World have held its own surprising parallels? Far from being a trackless wilderness, the Amazon basin reveals mounting evidence of large, sophisticated societies that thrived for centuries before European contact. One of the most compelling examples lies not deep in the rainforest, but on a vast island at the river's very mouth. Morojo Island is a flat, seasonally flooded landmass the size of Switzerland. For over 1,000 years, from around 400 to 1300 AD, it was home to the Marajora culture, a people who transformed their challenging environment into a cradle of civilization. Their most stunning legacy is their pottery, archaeologists have unearthed enormous, intricately decorated funerary urns, some standing over 3 feet tall. These are not simple clay vessels, they are canvases. Their surfaces are covered in complex geometric patterns, swirling lines, and stylized figures painted in rich red and black on white slip. The artistry is precise, symbolic, and points to a highly developed artistic tradition and a complex belief system surrounding death and the afterlife. Beyond their ceramics, the Marajora were master landscape engineers. They built hundreds of monumental earthworks, artificial mounds called tisos, to elevate their villages and ceremonial centers above the annual floods. These were not random piles of dirt, they were carefully planned constructions that required organized labor and social hierarchy to create. Some mounds reach over 60 feet in height and cover dozens of acres, forming the foundations for entire communities. Evidence suggests they managed the flooded forests and savannas with sophisticated agroforestry, cultivating useful trees and plants in a sustainable system that supported a sizable population. The social structure of the Marajora is still being unraveled, but the clues in their art and burial practices are tantalizing. Many of the most elaborate graves, filled with the finest painted pottery and other grave goods, belong to women. This pattern has led some anthropologists to propose that Marajora society may have been matrilineal, where lineage and inheritance were traced through the female line, or that women held significant religious or political authority. Here, then, is a profound possibility. When Orellana and his men, half-starved and desperate, sailed past the mouth of this mighty river or heard tales from coastal tribes, could they have been hearing distant, fragmented echoes of a culture like the Marajora? A powerful society with monumental architecture, exquisite art, and a social structure where women played prominent, perhaps leading roles. To a Spanish mind steeped in the classical legends they carried with them, what else could such a description be but the kingdom of the Amazons? The timing adds another layer of intrigue. The classic Marajora culture had declined centuries before Orellana's arrival, likely due to environmental shifts or social changes. But its memory would have persisted in oral histories among the descendant peoples living along the river. The conquistadors were not encountering a living Marajora civilization, but they may have been stumbling upon the legendary shadow it left behind, a ghost of a once great society that fit perfectly into the empty space on their mental map labeled Amazon. So the legend may have found not one but 2 homes, one in the historical reality of the steppes that inspired the Greek myth, and another in the archaeological reality of the Amazon that gave the conquistadors' dreams a tangible, if misunderstood, location. The forest floor itself began to whisper its secrets. For centuries, the dense canopy of the Amazon created a perfect illusion, a green curtain that hid the past from view. The narrative was set. This was a pristine, untouched wilderness where only small, scattered tribes could survive. Then, technology pulled back that curtain. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, archaeologists began using a revolutionary tool, LiDAR. This system works by firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft down through the forest canopy. The lasers bounce off the ground and return, allowing computers to strip away every single leaf and tree, digitally revealing the bare earth beneath. What they saw rewritten the history books across hundreds of square miles, particularly in the southwestern Amazon basin in Brazil and Bolivia. The ground was not wild and empty. It was etched with intention. The LiDAR maps revealed enormous geometric shapes, perfect circles, squares, and octagons carved into the earth. These are the Amazonian geoglyphs, massive earthworks often over 300 feet across, with ditches and banks that would have taken coordinated, sophisticated labor to construct. They are not natural formations, they are the signature of a civilization. And they are everywhere, with over 800 such sites identified so far, likely just a fraction of what still lies hidden. But the geoglyphs are only part of the story. The same technology has unveiled an entire hidden landscape. It has shown networks of straight, raised causeways connecting settlements across miles of swampy ground. It has revealed the outlines of large, fortified villages laid out in precise, circular or rectangular plans, often surrounded by deep moats and tall palisade walls. Some of these sites, like the fortified settlements in the upper Tapajos Basin, show evidence of dense populations living in complex, organized communities. This was not a wilderness barely scratched by human presence. This was a managed, engineered, and populated world. The evidence points to societies that practiced a form of large-scale landscape domestication. They likely enriched the naturally poor rainforest soil by creating vast tracts of fertile, dark earth known as terra preta, through centuries of composting and charcoal incorporation. They cultivated orchards of fruit and nut trees and engineered the land with canals and ponds for fish farming. The Amazon, as we now understand it, was a giant garden city, supporting populations that could have numbered in the millions long before Columbus set sail. These discoveries shatter the old myth of a virgin forest. They prove that the Amazon was home to advanced, sedentary cultures capable of transforming their environment on a monumental scale. So when the Spanish conquistadors, hearts pounding with dreams of gold, pushed into this green maze, they were not entering an empty land. They were walking, utterly unaware, across the overgrown ruins of a lost world, a world whose scale and sophistication we are only just beginning to grasp. These were the lost cities, just not the ones the conquistadors were dreaming of. The sprawling geoglyphs and fortified villages revealed by Lydia paint a picture of a landscape that was profoundly human. These were not mere campsites, but true urban centers organized around large, open plazas. These plazas were the beating hearts of community life, spaces for gatherings, markets, and ceremonies. Surrounding them, archaeologists find the remains of ceremonial mounds, earthen platforms that likely served as stages for rituals or the foundations for important structures. The scale is what stuns. Some of these complexes cover dozens of acres, laid out with a precision that speaks of central planning and social hierarchy. This was a built environment, a testament to societies that knew how to organize labor, design communal spaces, and imprint their identity on the land itself. Their wealth was not mined from the earth but cultivated from it. These were master farmers of the forest, practicing a sophisticated form of agroforestry. They did not clear vast fields for single crops. They sculpted the jungle into a productive mosaic. They planted groves of valuable fruit and nut trees like Brazil nut and palm, managed wild resources, and most importantly, they created the rich black soil known as terra preta. This fertile earth, engineered over generations by adding charcoal, compost, and waste, was their true gold. It allowed them to sustain large, permanent populations in a place Europeans saw as impossible for civilization. So where does the legend of gold come in? Imagine the chain of communication. A Spanish soldier, desperate and hopeful, asks a coastal tribesperson through a clumsy interpreter about powerful people inland. The tribesperson, perhaps speaking of a distant trading partner or an ancestral memory of these mound-building cultures, describes a great people who live in large villages with shining temples atop earthen platforms. The word for temple or chief's house might be translated as palace. The polished ceramic artifacts, the glittering mica or quartz used in decoration, the golden sheen of ceremonial body paint made from precious minerals, all of these details get filtered through a lens of desperate greed. By the time the story travels back to a Spanish camp, the shining temple on a mound becomes a golden palace, the managed orchards become gardens of gems, and the sophisticated society becomes a kingdom of limitless treasure. The discoveries do not prove the existence of a literal city of gold, but they provide the perfect, real-world foundation upon which that legend could be built. They reveal an Amazon that was not a blank space for fantasy, but a populated, civilized world whose true nature was so astonishing. It was easier for Europeans to turn it into a myth than to understand it. The lost cities were real, and their rediscovery forces us to see the entire Amazonian legend not as a childish fairy tale, but as a distorted reflection of a magnificent, forgotten truth. Gold was not a fantasy in the ancient Americas, it was a breathtaking reality. While the Amazon rainforest yielded little of the precious metal, the mountains that cradled it were a different story. High in the Andes, civilizations mastered gold with a skill that bordered on magic. The most famous source of the El Dorado legend was not a jungle tribe, but the Muisca people of what is now Colombia. Their ritual was the origin of the Golden King. In a sacred ceremony, a new ruler would coat his body in sticky resin before being dusted from head to toe in fine gold powder. He would then journey on a raft to the center of Lake Guatavita, where he would plunge into the waters, washing the gold off as an offering to the gods. This was El Dorado, the Gilded One, a literal man of gold. The Muisca, along with other cultures like the Quimbaya, were unparalleled metallurgists. They didn't just hammer gold into sheets, they perfected a technique called lost wax casting. An artist would sculpt a figure in beeswax, coat it in clay to create a mold, then fire it. The wax would melt and drain away, leaving a hollow space into which molten gold was poured. The result was not mere jewelry, but intricate, three-dimensional sculptures of astonishing detail, from delicate Poporo bottles for ritual lime to intricate pendants depicting gods and animals. Further south, the Inca Empire called gold the sweat of the sun and silver the tears of the moon. They sheathed entire temple walls in gold plate and filled gardens with life-sized sculptures of plants and animals crafted from the metal. Their gold was a divine material, a symbol of power and solar connection, worked by specialists who understood complex alloys and could join metals seamlessly. This was the tangible, glittering world that Spanish conquistadors actually saw and plundered. Their minds, now feverish with greed, then turned to the map. They knew these rich, gold-working cultures existed in the mountains, and they knew a vast, unknown river flowed from those very mountains into an uncharted continent. A devastatingly simple logic took hold. If the mountains were full of gold, then the great river that drained them must lead to even more, perhaps to the source itself. The legends of the Amazonian interior became a blank screen onto which they projected the dazzling wealth they had already witnessed. Every story from a local guide about a powerful chief was heard as a king. Every description of a ceremonial structure became a golden temple. The profound spiritual relationship these Andean cultures had with gold was utterly lost in translation, replaced by a crude and desperate hunger for raw treasure. The bitter irony is that the Amazon basin itself has very little naturally occurring gold, and archaeological evidence for advanced metallurgy there is scant. The true cities of gold were not hidden in the jungle, they were shining in plain sight high in the mountains long before the first European ever arrived. The conquistadors were chasing a reflection, a mirage born from a magnificent reality they had already destroyed but never truly understood. The true power of Amazonian societies often flowed not from thrones but from kinship. To understand how the legend of warrior queens could take root, we must look beyond battles and look at families. Many indigenous cultures across the basin, both past and present, operate on principles of gender complementarity. This is not a simple division of labor, but a profound world view where men and women are seen as two essential, interdependent halves of a whole, each with their own vital domains of power and responsibility. In these systems, female authority is woven into the very fabric of social life, creating a reality that European explorers, with their rigid patriarchal lenses, could easily misinterpret as a kingdom ruled by women. Take the concept of matriarchality. In numerous tribes, when a couple marries, the man moves to live with or near his wife's family. This means the core social unit, the home and the extended family network, is anchored by women. Land knowledge and lineage are passed down through the maternal line. A man's position in the community is thus intrinsically linked to his wife and her kin. To an outsider who only sees the surface, this could look like a society where women hold the ultimate cards, where men are almost like guests in a female-dominated world. Then there is the immense spiritual authority of the female shaman. Across the Amazon, women are frequently the primary healers, ritual leaders, and intermediaries with the spirit world. They are the ones who administer powerful plant medicines, interpret dreams, and guide the community's relationship with the forest. This is not a supporting role, it is a position of supreme respect and often fear. A female shaman commands knowledge that can cure or curse, that can communicate with ancestors and control the forces of nature. To a conquistador hearing tales of a powerful woman who could command life and death with her knowledge of the jungle's secrets, how might he have described her? Would she not sound, in his reports, like a kind of queen or sorceress, a figure of awe-inspiring power? These social structures create a spectrum of female autonomy that is simply alien to the European model of centralized, male-only political kingship. There were no literal warrior queens leading armies in the rainforest, but there were, and are, societies where women are the pillars of the community, the keepers of land and lineage, and the revered conduits to the divine. When a desperate, gold-hungry Spaniard sat with a local guide through a clumsy translator, asking about powerful people inland, any description of a matrilocal village or a respected female elder could have been catastrophically mistranslated. The word for a female clan leader might become queen. The description of a shaman's spiritual authority might become absolute rule. The complex, balanced truth of gender complementarity would be flattened into the only story they knew how to hear, the myth of the Amazons, a gynocracy waiting to be conquered. The legend, therefore, may be a distorted echo of a real and sophisticated social truth, a reflection glimpsed in a cultural mirror the Europeans themselves had broken. Perhaps the greatest treasure was never metal at all. If we strip away the conquistador's greed and listen to the land itself, the legend begins to transform. The fabled gold of El Dorado takes on a new, more profound meaning. It was not a hoard of ingots in a vault, but the living, breathing wealth of the Amazon basin. This was a gold that grew on trees, that swam in the rivers, that was woven into the very soil. The true golden cities were the vast, managed landscapes of the pre-Columbian world, their wealth measured in abundance, not currency. The most dazzling proof of this is not in a museum, but underfoot in the earth known as terra preta. These are patches of incredibly fertile, dark soil, often found in large expanses near ancient settlement sites. Unlike the thin, nutrient-poor soil typical of the rainforest, terra preta is rich and deep, capable of supporting intensive agriculture. This was no accident of nature. It is anthropogenic, meaning human-made, created over centuries by the indigenous people. They enriched the land through a deliberate process, adding charcoal from controlled burns, composted waste, broken pottery, and organic matter. This created a self-regenerating, supercharged soil that could feed large, permanent populations. This engineered earth was their foundational treasure, the capital upon which their civilization was built. It was a golden resource more valuable than any metal, for it guaranteed life itself. The cities built upon this wealth were not of stone and spires, but of earth and community. They were the geoglyph complexes and raised plaza villages, the networked settlements connected by causeways. Their monuments were the ceremonial mounds and the carefully managed forests, their palaces the longhouses and communal spaces that fostered social life. This was a different architecture of prosperity, one designed for sustainability and connection to the environment. And what of the Amazons themselves in this reinterpreted kingdom? They were the women who held the threads of this society together. In the matrilocal villages, they were the anchors of the home and lineage, the keepers of the cultivated land. As shamans, they were the spiritual guardians who understood the medicinal plants and the cycles of the forest. the ones who could commune with the forces that made the terra preta fertile and the rivers full. Their authority was not wielded from a throne of conquest, but earned through knowledge, nurture, and an essential role in the community's survival. They were powerful, respected, and central, a reality that, when glimpsed through the distorted lens of a foreign culture, could easily be mythologized into a race of warrior queens. So the legend of the Amazons and their lost cities of gold emerges not as a total fiction, but as a catastrophic translation. The Europeans arrived with a vocabulary of value limited to mines and monarchs. When they encountered a civilization whose wealth was rooted in ecological mastery and social balance, they had no words for it. They saw fertile black earth and imagined it must hide gold beneath. They saw complex societies with influential women and could only describe them as Amazons. They saw a managed, abundant landscape and called it a city waiting to be plundered. The tragedy is that in searching for a fantasy, they walked right over a reality far more magnificent, and in their failure to understand it, they contributed to its unraveling. The lost golden city was never lost, it was all around them, a living system they were too blinded by greed to see. Centuries later, the legend found a new kind of immortality on the printed page and the silver screen. The modern Amazon was reborn not from an ancient poet, but from a psychologist's inkwell in 1941. Psychologist William Moulton Marston, writing under the pen name Charles Moulton, created Wonder Woman for DC Comics. He envisioned her as a new kind of hero, one who would conquer with love and equality rather than fists and domination. Her home was the Masira, a hidden island paradise populated solely by immortal, super-powered Amazons, a direct lift from the classical myths. This was no longer a frightening tribe of adversaries, but a utopian society, a beacon of female strength and peace isolated from a world of men. Wonder Woman's journey from the Masira to man's world reframed the entire archetype for the 20th century. She was not an enemy to be slain by a Greek hero, but a savior arriving to teach humanity a better way. This profound shift transformed the Amazons from a mysterious, threatening other into an aspirational ideal, a symbol of lost wisdom and potential that our own flawed world had forgotten. The comics and later the blockbuster films kept the core ingredients of the ancient tale, a secluded society of warrior women, but repurposed them for a modern audience hungry for icons of empowerment. The legend was no longer about a confrontation, it was about an invitation. This pop culture resurrection did more than entertain, it directly shaped how millions now visualize the historical mystery. For many, the first image that comes to mind at the word Amazon is not a Scythian horse archer, but Gal Gadot in armor standing on the cliffs of the Masira. The cinematic language of these films, with its gleaming temples and perfected warrior sisterhood, becomes the default setting for imagining what a real Amazon society might have looked like, blurring the line between mythic fantasy and archaeological possibility. This influence stretches beyond superhero stories. Adventure cinema has repeatedly used the Amazon legend as a template for exploration narratives. The film The Lost City of Z, based on the true story of Percy Fawcett, directly engages with the colonial obsession. It portrays the jungle not just as a physical challenge, but as a psychological maze where the line between reality and myth dissolves. Fawcett's quest for a lost civilization is haunted by the same stories of golden cities and powerful, hidden tribes that drove Orellana centuries before. The movie visually translates the conquistador's fever dream, presenting the Amazon as a place where time itself seems to warp, and ancient truths might still be waiting in the green shadows. These portrayals, from comic books to historical dramas, perform a crucial cultural function. They keep the legend in circulation, constantly refreshing its imagery and themes for new generations. Each retelling adds another layer to the palimpsest, mixing classical details with contemporary values. The result is a feedback loop. Public fascination, fueled by pop culture, drives interest in the historical and archaeological research. And new discoveries from the steppes or the rainforest, in turn, feed back into the stories, offering fresh details for writers and filmmakers to reinterpret. We see this in how modern portrayals have gradually incorporated elements of the real Scythian finds, like intricate tattoos and practical leather armor, moving away from the classical Greek look of breastplates and sandals towards something grittier and more historically plausible. The legend is no longer a static story from a dusty book. It is a living, evolving conversation between our past and our present. It asks us what we fear, what we value, and what we hope to find when we dare to look beyond the edges of our map. So when we now ponder the original mystery, we must acknowledge that we are seeing it through a lens polished by a century of cinema and comics. This doesn't make the question less real, it makes it more layered. We are not just investigating ancient history, we are untangling why this particular story of all the world's myths continues to hold such irresistible power over us. This cultural evolution has now reached a powerful, modern crescendo. The Amazon has been reborn as an icon not of fear but of liberation. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, feminist movements have reached back through time to reclaim this legendary figure, stripping away the layers of male anxiety and colonial fantasy to find a potent symbol at its core. The Amazon, in this new light, represents the ultimate vision of female autonomy, a society free from patriarchal control where women define their own destiny, defend their own borders, and answer to no one but themselves. She is the archetype of physical and political strength, an emblem of self-sufficiency that resonates deeply in struggles for gender equality. You see this reclamation everywhere, from the names of feminist bookstores and publishing collectives to the imagery used in political marches, where the silhouette of a warrior woman with a bow stands for unyielding resistance. The appeal is undeniable. It offers a prehistorical precedent, a mythic proof that a world ordered by women is not just a utopian dream, but something that has existed, at least in the human imagination, for millennia. It provides a powerful counter-narrative to the idea that male dominance is natural or inevitable. Yet this empowering adoption exists in a fascinating and sometimes uncomfortable tension with the myth's original roots. We must remember how the ancient Greeks primarily used the Amazons in their stories. They were almost always the antagonists, the terrifying other who had to be defeated by a hero like Heracles or Achilles to restore the proper order of the world. Their society was described not with admiration, but with a mixture of horror and exotic fascination. Furthermore, their legendary battles were often framed with a disturbing undercurrent of eroticized violence. The famous myth of Achilles and the Amazon queen Penthesilea is a prime example. He falls in love with her beauty at the very moment he kills her. This is a classic male gaze narrative where the powerful woman is ultimately subdued and her death is mingled with desire. So when modern movements embrace the Amazon, they are performing a profound act of cultural alchemy. They are taking a figure crafted by a patriarchal society to embody everything that society feared and flipping the script. What was meant to be a warning becomes an aspiration. The violence ascribed to them is reinterpreted not as savagery, but as the righteous defense of autonomy. Their separation from men is seen not as a bizarre abnormality, but as a conscious choice for independence. This reclamation is not a historical claim, but a symbolic one. It acknowledges that the original myths were stories told by men for men, yet it insists that within those stories, a seed of a different truth can be found and nurtured. It asks, what if we stop viewing the Amazons through the eyes of the Greek heroes sent to conquer them, and instead try to see the world from the battlements of their own city? This shift in perspective is everything. It transforms a tale of conquest into a parable of self-determination. The ongoing power of the Amazon legend today lies precisely in this duality. She is both an ancient phantom and a modern banner, a reminder that the stories we inherit are not prisons but clay, ready to be reshaped by the hands of those who see a different future in the echoes of the past. The quest for these vanished worlds has never truly ended. While the conquistadors' dreams of gold have faded, a new generation of seekers now walks the forest floor, armed not with swords but with satellites and scanning lasers. The legend of lost cities has evolved into a scientific pursuit, and the Amazon remains one of the planet's last great frontiers for discovery. Modern expeditions are driven by a different kind of hunger, a thirst for knowledge about the human capacity to shape and thrive within the most challenging environments on Earth. Archaeologists, anthropologists, and ecologists now collaborate in a race against time, as deforestation and climate change threaten to erase the physical evidence of these ancient societies before we can even find them. Their tools are revolutionary. LiDAR technology, which first revealed the staggering scale of the geoglyphs, is now being deployed over vast new areas. Each flight of the laser-equipped plane is like turning on a light in a dark room, instantly mapping the topography beneath the impenetrable canopy. Recent surveys in regions like the Llanos de Mojos in Bolivia and the Upper Tapajos in Brazil continue to unveil breathtaking complexity. Networks of roads, canals, and plaza villages that suggest interconnected societies across hundreds of miles. One ongoing project, a massive LiDAR survey covering thousands of square kilometers of the Colombian Amazon, promises to systematically scan areas that have been virtually inaccessible for centuries. The data from these missions is not just a map of ruins, it is a blueprint of a forgotten way of life, showing how these cultures managed water, agriculture, and community on a continental scale. But the search is not confined to the air. On the ground, teams navigate remote river systems, following clues from satellite imagery and the oral histories of present-day indigenous communities. These living cultures are often the key, their stories and traditional knowledge pointing researchers toward significant sites, from ancient terra preta gardens to forgotten ceremonial mounds. In a powerful twist, the descendants of the very people who built these landscapes are now guiding scientists to understand them. Alongside these formal efforts exists a vibrant community of digital explorers. Using publicly available satellite imagery from platforms like Google Earth, amateur archaeologists and curious citizens scour the rainforest for geometric patterns and unexplained earthworks. While most leads turn out to be natural formations, this crowd-sourced scrutiny has occasionally flagged potential sites for professional investigation, democratizing the search in an unprecedented way. The spirit of Orellana and Fawcett lives on, but its goals have been transformed. We are no longer searching for a single golden city to plunder. We are piecing together a mosaic of a lost world, a civilization that mastered the Amazon on its own terms. Each new discovery, each hidden plaza or causeway revealed by laser light, is a quiet triumph. It proves that the greatest treasure was never gold, but resilience, ingenuity, and a profound lesson in how to live within the green heart of our planet. The jungle still holds its secrets, but now we are finally learning how to listen. Perhaps the deepest mystery lies not in the jungle, but within us. Why does this particular legend, of all the world's myths, cling to our imagination with such tenacity? The answer speaks to fundamental human drives, a cocktail of desire and curiosity that makes the story of the Amazons and their golden cities endlessly renewable. At its core is the primal allure of the lost world, the idea that somewhere just beyond the edge of our maps, a forgotten civilization awaits rediscovery is a powerful narrative engine. It promises that history is not a closed book, that wonders remain hidden, and that we, the modern explorers, might be the ones to turn the page. This taps directly into our drive for discovery, the same instinct that sent humans across oceans and into space. The Amazonian legend offers a perfect template for this quest, a blank space on the map labeled, "Here be dragons," or in this case, warrior queens. It transforms the unknown from something frightening into something tantalizing, a puzzle begging to be solved. Then there is the potent fascination with the reversal of social order. A society where women rule and fight while men are marginalized is a profound thought experiment. For centuries of patriarchal societies, it was a thrilling and terrifying taboo, a nightmare scenario that also contained a secret thrill. Today, that same reversal is reinterpreted as a symbol of empowerment, a vision of what could be if traditional power structures were inverted. The legend allows every generation to project its own anxieties and aspirations about gender onto a mythic canvas, making it perpetually relevant. And of course, there is the timeless dream of treasure. El Dorado is the ultimate metaphor for unearned reward, for stumbling upon a fortune that changes everything. This is not just about greed, it is about hope, the lottery ticket fantasy that life might contain a secret shortcut to abundance and significance. The lost city of gold represents a solution to all our struggles, a place where want ceases to exist. But perhaps the most compelling treasure is metaphorical. The real golden city we seek is meaning itself. In searching for a lost civilization, we are often searching for a lost part of ourselves, for a purer, wiser, or more heroic past. The Amazons represent a world uncorrupted by our modern flaws, a society living in harmony with nature, governed by principles we feel we have lost. Finding them would not just fill museums with gold, it would restore a sense of wonder to the world, proving that our oldest stories might still hold truth. We want to believe because disbelief leaves the world smaller, known, and fully charted. The legend keeps a door open to the miraculous, insisting that reality might still have secrets grand enough to match our grandest dreams. The bones themselves have begun to speak a new language written in the very code of life. Recent breakthroughs in genetic analysis are taking the archaeological discoveries on the steps from compelling to conclusive. Scientists have now extracted ancient DNA from dozens of those high-status warrior burials, the ones filled with bows and golden diadems. The results are definitive. The skeletons buried with the full honors of battle are biologically female. This genetic confirmation silences any lingering doubts that these weapons were merely symbolic offerings. These women were not buried as warriors in metaphor, they lived and died as warriors in fact. The DNA does more than confirm sex, it opens a window into their lives. Isotopic analysis of their teeth and bones acts like a chemical diary, recording what they ate and where they traveled. The findings paint a portrait of immense mobility. These individuals consumed a diet rich in protein, consistent with a pastoral, horse-riding lifestyle centered on herds and hunting. The isotopic signatures often show they were not born in the region where they were buried, having migrated significant distances across the vast steppe during their lifetimes. This was not a sedentary society, it was one constantly in motion, and women were integral to that movement. The craftsmanship buried with them tells another part of the story. Analysis of their weaponry, from the composite bows to the iron swords, shows a level of personalization and where that indicates extensive habitual use. These were not factory-made items issued from a central armory. They were bespoke tools maintained and mastered by their owner. The intricate animal-style art that decorates their gear, the golden deer and coiled predators, was not just decoration, it was a spiritual language, a claim of identity and power that they carried into life and death. When you combine the genetic proof, the dietary evidence of a nomadic life, and the intimately used arsenal, the composite picture is stunningly clear. These were highly mobile horse archers of elite status, who participated in long-distance trade and conflict, and who commanded the respect necessary to be sent into the afterlife with the ultimate symbols of their people's strength. They are the undeniable flesh and blood reality behind the Greek stories. The Scythians and Sarmatians did not have a separate, mythical class of Amazons. They had a societal structure where skilled women could ascend to the highest martial roles, becoming the prototypes for a legend that would echo for millennia. This is no longer speculation, it is a fact written in their genes, etched in their bones, and forged in the metal of their swords. their true wealth was a living, breathing technology cultivated from the soil itself. While conquistadors shattered empires for glittering ore, the ancient Amazonians were mastering a far more sophisticated form of riches, one that turned the entire rainforest into a productive, sustainable garden. This was not a passive existence of hunting and gathering, but an active, brilliant engineering of the ecosystem. At the heart of this system was the miraculous terra preta, the dark, fertile earth we mentioned earlier. But how was it made? It was a deliberate, generations-long process of soil enrichment. People would create charcoal through controlled, low-temperature burns of agricultural waste, a process called pyrolysis. This charcoal, incredibly porous and stable, was then mixed into the soil along with compost, manure, broken pottery, and food scraps. The pottery shards were not trash, they acted like a sponge, helping to retain moisture and nutrients in the ground. This recipe transformed the thin, acidic, nutrient-poor soil of the rainforest into a deep, black, self-regenerating supersoil. It was a permanent investment in the land, a capital that actually grew more valuable with time. This engineered earth could produce bountiful harvests year after year, supporting the large, settled populations that built those geoglyphs and plaza villages. It was quite literally the foundation of their civilization. On top of this fertile base, they built an agricultural system of stunning complexity, a multi-layered tapestry known as agroforestry. They did not clear-cut vast fields for single crops like modern industrial farming. Instead, they mimicked the natural structure of the forest itself, creating a vertical garden of food. The canopy layer might include towering Brazil nut trees, deliberately planted or protected for their protein-rich nuts. Beneath that, a middle layer of fruit trees like papaya, avocado, and palm species provided oils and carbohydrates. At the ground level, they would cultivate shade-tolerant plants like pineapples, chili peppers, and medicinal herbs. Vines like passion fruit and vanilla would climb the trunks. This was a perennial system, producing food continuously, season after season, for decades. It was biodiversity as a survival strategy, ensuring that if one crop failed, dozens of others would still thrive. This agroforestry required an encyclopedic knowledge of thousands of plant species, their relationships, and their needs. The Amazonians were not just farmers, they were master botanists and ecologists. They domesticated and perfected critical crops that would later feed the world. Take manioc, also known as cassava. They developed complex techniques to process this tuber, which is poisonous in its raw state, into a safe, storable flour that could feed entire cities. Or consider cocoa, the source of chocolate. They were likely the first to cultivate the cacao tree, valuing its beans not as a sweet treat, but as a currency and a sacred ingredient in rituals. Each of these plants represents centuries of selective breeding and intimate understanding. This entire system, the terra preta and the layered agroforestry, created an abundance that was utterly invisible to the European eye. A conquistador standing in one of these food forests would not see organized rows of wheat or barley, the European symbols of agriculture. He would see what looked like wild jungle, failing to recognize the careful design and immense productivity hidden within the apparent chaos. He was blind to the true economy. The gold he sought was a dead, inert metal. The gold they possessed was alive. It was the fertile black earth, the perennial harvest, the profound knowledge of how to make the forest feed millions. This was a wealth that could not be looted in a single raid, packed onto a galleon and melted down. It was a wealth rooted in place, in knowledge, and in a long-term partnership with nature. The tragedy is that this sustainable, abundant civilization represented a path not taken, a demonstration of how humans could thrive within the Amazon without destroying it. Their lost cities were not made of stone but of soil and seed, a golden kingdom whose value we are only now, centuries too late, beginning to truly comprehend. These ancient accounts often tell a compelling story, but they rarely agree with one another. Take the Greek poet Homer, who first mentions the Amazons in the Iliad. His reference is brief, almost casual, treating them as a known, if distant, people from the East. He provides no grand origin story, no detailed society, just a respected enemy force from the edges of the map. Contrast that with the later historian Herodotus, writing centuries after Homer. He offers a much more elaborate, almost ethnographic account. He places them in Scythia, describes their marriage customs with neighboring tribes, and even provides a detailed origin story involving a shipwreck and a rebellion. Herodotus is trying to fit the myth into a historical framework, but his sources were likely a mix of travelers' tales and his own inferences. The gap between these two Greek sources is vast, one poetic and vague, the other striving for factual detail yet still deeply speculative. Then we have the Roman era. The poet Virgil in the Aeneid uses the Amazons purely as a symbolic device, a metaphor for wild, untamed forces that must be conquered to establish Roman order. His Amazons are not a people to be understood, but an obstacle to be mythologized. Meanwhile, the geographer Strabo, writing around the same time, skeptically reviews all the existing stories. He points out geographical impossibilities and dismisses many tales as fanciful exaggeration, yet he still cannot bring himself to say they never existed. He is caught between a rational mind and the weight of tradition. This pattern of contradiction only deepens with the Spanish chroniclers. Gaspar de Carvajal's diary of the Orellana expedition is our sole source for the river's naming. It is a first-hand account which should lend it credibility, but we must remember its context. It was written by a man who was starving, wounded, and desperate to justify a mutinous journey. His description of long-haired warriors who were women reads like a moment of confusion crystallized into legend, possibly crafted to ensure a heroic reception back in Spain. Later missionaries, eager to find new converts and justify their missions, collected indigenous stories that seemed to confirm the Amazon myth. But how much did they, consciously or not, lead their witnesses? When a Spanish friar asks a local elder through an interpreter if there are powerful women warriors inland, the elder might simply nod, offering a story that fits the foreigner's clear expectation. This creates a feedback loop of confirmation where European myth shapes the questions, which then shape the answers, which are taken back as proof. We also see clear mythological tropes recycled across the centuries. The motif of the warrior queen whose belt or girdle must be captured is a classic symbol of subduing a rival power, appearing in both Greek myth and later romanticized chronicles. The idea of a city accessible only by a secret pass or a hidden river is a standard feature of Lost World literature, from the Garden of the Hesperides to El Dorado. These are not historical details, they are narrative placeholders, signals to the audience that they are in the realm of legend. So how do we extract any truth from this tangled web? We must become source critics. We look for internal consistency, for corroboration from unrelated sources, and for the author's motive. A poet like Homer had no motive to invent a geographic reality. He was using a known trope. A conquistador like Orellana had every motive to embellish. An archaeologist Spade finding a Scythian warrior grave provides a silent, physical corroboration that the core concept of fighting women had a basis in reality, even if the details of their society were wildly distorted by Greek storytellers. The truth, then, lies not in accepting any one account, but in understanding the prism through which each was written. Each layer, from epic poetry to colonial report, refracts a possible reality through the fears, desires, and literary conventions of its time. Our job is not to find the one true story, but to listen to the chorus of contradictions and hear, in the dissonance, the faint echo of something real. A single word spoken in desperation can echo for centuries. The decision by Francisco de Orellana to name that immense river the Amazon was not a casual act of cartography, it was a declaration of intent. That name, lifted from an ancient European myth, was a flag planted in the unknown, a promise of wonders to come. It transformed a geographical feature into a destination, a blank space on the map that now pulsed with the allure of legend. Every explorer who came after, every mapmaker sketching the new world, inherited that name and the colossal expectations it carried. The river was no longer just a river, it was a pathway to the kingdom of warrior women and their golden cities, a psychological landmark that guided the course of history itself. This naming was the first and most permanent impact of the legend, a linguistic ghost that haunts the continent to this day. That ghost then began to draw men into the green heart of the unknown. The quest for the Amazons and El Dorado became the primary engine for the exploration of the Amazon basin for over 200 years. Spanish and Portuguese expeditions, funded by crowns and driven by dreams, pushed further and further upriver, driven by a mirage. Their journeys were not aimless wanderings, they were targeted searches for a specific fantasy. Each expedition produced maps, and those maps were not neutral documents. They were filled with speculative geography, illustrating vast inland seas, mountain ranges of gold, and the sprawling, hopeful label, Reino de los Amazonas. These maps, circulated in European courts, shaped the geopolitical ambitions of empires. They defined spheres of influence and justified treaties, like the Treaty of Tordesillas, which divided the New World between Spain and Portugal along a meridian that cut right through the Amazon's unknown interior. Nations were literally carving up a continent based on imagined riches and mythical kingdoms they believed lay within it. The legend provided the rationale for claiming and exploiting lands that were, in reality, inhabited by sophisticated indigenous societies with no concept of European borders. This relentless pursuit, fueled by myth, unleashed a wave of tragedy upon those real societies. The quest for golden cities was not a peaceful archaeological dig, it was an invasion. Expeditions required massive supplies, which were often taken by force from local villages. They brought with them European diseases like smallpox and influenza, against which indigenous populations had no immunity. Epidemics raced ahead of the explorers themselves, decimating communities that had thrived for millennia. The psychological toll was equally devastating. To extract information about the location of El Dorado or the Amazons, conquistadors frequently resorted to torture and intimidation. Indigenous people were caught in an impossible bind. If they said they knew nothing, they were disbelieved and punished. If they tried to divert the strangers away from their own homes by pointing further inland, they perpetuated the myth and sent the violence deeper into the jungle. Entire cultures were disrupted, displaced, or erased, not in the service of building a colony, but in the desperate chase for a phantom. The real cities of the Amazon, the Terra Preta gardens and geoglyph complexes, were not found and plundered for their gold. They were often bypassed and left to crumble, their true value invisible to eyes blinded by greed. The legend acted as a destructive filter, causing Europeans to see only what they wanted to see and destroy everything else in their path. Perhaps the most profound consequence was one of misunderstanding. For centuries, the dominant European narrative portrayed the Amazon as a pristine, empty wilderness, a green desert waiting for civilization to arrive. This view justified exploitation and colonization, but we now know this was a catastrophic error, a direct result of the legend's distorting lens. Because the conquistadors were looking for stone palaces and gold ingots, they failed to recognize the civilization they were actually walking through. The managed forests, the fertile black earth, the monumental earthworks, these were the true markers of a complex society. By chasing a fantasy, the Europeans blinded themselves to a magnificent reality. This historical misperception had lasting effects, influencing policies of land use and conservation for centuries. The legend of the Amazons and their lost cities did not just name a river or draw a few maps, it fundamentally shaped how an entire continent was perceived, conquered, and misunderstood. It is a stark reminder that the stories we tell about a place can be more powerful and often more destructive than the place itself. so we are left with a tapestry, not a single truth. The threads are all here, each one real, but the final picture depends on where you stand. On the Eurasian steppes, the evidence is as solid as the earth in the Kurgan graves. Genetics, archaeology, and injury all testify to the historical reality of women who rode, fought, and led. These were the Scythian and Sarmatian horse archers, the undeniable human inspiration that traveled back to Greece along trade routes and travelers' tales. The Greeks then did what master storytellers do. They took that raw material of powerful, trouser-wearing women from the edge of their world and mythologized it, crafting the Amazons into a perfect foil for their own heroes and anxieties. That is the first layer of the palimpsest, a real culture rewritten as epic legend. Then the story sailed west. When Spanish explorers entered the Amazon basin, they carried that classical myth in their minds alongside a burning hunger for gold. They encountered something utterly foreign, a civilization whose wealth was not mined but grown, built on terra preta and agroforestry, with social structures where women held foundational authority through matrilineal clans and shamanic power. The conquistadors had no framework for this, so their minds performed a desperate translation. The fertile black earth must hide gold. The influential female elders must be warrior queens. The managed, abundant landscape must be a city waiting to be plundered. The legend provided the only vocabulary they had to describe a reality far more sophisticated than their own greed could comprehend. This is the second layer, a magnificent new world reality misunderstood through an old world myth, and the gold, the true gold, was always metaphorical. For the steppe warriors, it was the status symbolized by a golden diadem, a mark of elite power earned on horseback. For the Amazonian societies, it was the living wealth of the forest, the perennial harvest from engineered soil. For the conquistadors, it was a literal dream of instant fortune, a projection of the dazzling Andean metallurgy they had already witnessed. And for us today, the gold is the enduring power of the story itself, a symbol that can be reshaped into an icon of female empowerment, a plot for adventure cinema, or a mystery driving scientific discovery. The Amazons are therefore the ultimate palimpsest, a parchment written upon, scraped clean, and written upon again by every culture that touched it. The original writing, the reality of steppe warrior women, is still faintly visible. The medieval gloss, the colonial overwriting, is bold and dramatic, and our modern annotations, from comic books to DNA studies, add new layers of meaning. This is why the legend feels so persistent, so alive. It is not a static fairy tale frozen in a book. It is a living story built upon kernels of truth, constantly being reshaped to reflect our deepest fears, our highest aspirations, and our unending curiosity about the hidden corners of the world and the untold possibilities of human society. They are both legend and reality because the best legends always are. Our journey has spanned from Homer's epics to the laser scans of modern archaeology. We followed a legend born on the Greek stage, a story of warrior women that sailed across an ocean and gave a continent its name. We watched as conquistadors, blinded by gold, chased a mirage through a jungle they believed was empty. And we witnessed a stunning reversal as science began to pull back the canopy. No literal city of gold ruled by warrior queens has ever been unearthed. Yet the search for it has uncovered treasures far more profound. We found the real Amazons not in myth, but in the steppe graves of Scythia, where women were buried with their bows and golden diadems, honored as elite warriors. We found them in the social fabric of the Amazon itself, in the matrilineal clans and the spiritual authority of female shamans. More astonishingly, the quest revealed the lost cities were real, just not of gold. They were civilizations of earth and seed, masters of the terra preta soil and the layered orchard, who built geoglyphs and plaza villages on a monumental scale. The legend was a catastrophic translation of a magnificent reality. It taught us that the true gold was always knowledge, the understanding of human ingenuity, and the diverse, powerful roles women have held across time and terrain. So we are left with one final, thrilling question. If this ancient story could hide such monumental truths, what other legends are waiting for science to reveal their reality? What forgotten worlds might be hidden in plain sight within the tales we think we already know? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey from myth to discovery, be sure to like and subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest mysteries.